We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph from Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 47a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that Shmuel asked Rav Huna the following question. The question is, Minayin lemisasek bekodshim shu pasel. From where do we know that misasek by kodshim is pasel? What does it mean, misasek by kodshim? Rashi explains, lemisasek bekodshim shochet kodshim. Let's say the person slaughters kodshim, he slaughters karbonos, velo bekavonim, but he doesn't have intention. Elakim misasek bedvarim acherim. It's like he's doing something else, but he ends up doing that. We'll take a look at Tosas as well. Tosas say, Minayin lemisasek bekodshim shu pasel parakama de chulin perish bekuntris. In chulin, Rashi explains, kagon misasek besakino lahagbio. Let's say the person is misasek, he just is picking up his knife, he's not intending to slaughter, he's just picking it up, o lezarko, to throw it, and then again he ends up doing that shchita. That would be an example of misasek. Tosas continue and ask, v'kasha, that's difficult. In that situation, even by chulin, even by a non-carbon, that would be pasel. And Tosas goes on to explain the question, and Tosas say at the end, v'nir, it appears, hai misasek to kodshim. What does it mean here, misasek of kodshim specifically? Hainu miskaven l'chatichas simonim. We're talking about when the person has intention to cut the simonim of the animal, v'lo l'shem zvicha, but not for the sake of slaughtering. The v'chulin kosher, in such a situation by a non-carbon, it would be kosher, u'v'kodshim pasel, but by a carbon it's going to be pasel. V'odiesh misasek acher, and Tosas say there's another kind of misasek, kagon mishum chulin. For example, let's say mishum chulin, dahainu kisavar shein chulin. Let's say, for example, he thought that the animal was chulin, and that's really what the Gemara was discussing on the previous summit. V'kulu miveshachet as ben habakar nafkir. Tosas say that all of these are learned out from the pasuk of veshachet as ben habakar, as the Gemara is about to say. And in any case, this is the question that Shmuel asked Rav Huna. What's the source for this? That misasek by kodshim is pasel, and Rav Huna answered shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, v'shachet as ben habakar lifnei Hashem, and we learn from that pasuk ad shetei shchito l'shem ben bakar. It has to be slaughtering l'shem ben bakar, again for the sake. It can't be a situation of misasek. And the Gemara continues and says, Amar Le, he said back to him, Zubi Adenu hi. What you're quoting, that we actually knew. In other words, we knew about this source lechatchila, but liakev minayin. From where do we know that it's ma'akev? That if it's not done, that if it's misasek, even after the fact it's disqualified, how do we know that? And the Gemara says, Amar Le said back to him, L'ritzonechem tizbachu. We learned that out from the pasuk of L'ritzonechem tizbachu, which means l'daitchem zavichu. You have to slaughter again. It has to be with your intention. It cannot be a situation of misasek. And Rashi explains, "Biyadenu hu raya zos kvar yadanu." So that proof, that source, we already know. Umiu mitzvah hu denafgalan veloikov. That we only learn out that it's a mitzvah. We don't learn that it's required. And I want to know the source. He wanted to know the source of the requirement. And again, the Gemara said it comes from the pasuk of L'ritzonechem tizbachu. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "She'ein hamachshava holeches ela achar ha'oved." The machshava, the intention, it follows the one who's actually performing the sacrificial rite, meaning to say the one who's performing, let's say, the shchita. We go by that intention, and that's why Rabbi Yossi said in the Mishnah that the person should have no intention, the Kohen should have no intention when doing the avodah, and that way he won't have a disqualifying intention, because we do not follow the intention of the owner. And the Gemara says, Masnisin deloki haitana detanya, our Mishnah, the idea that we follow the machshav of the person performing the avodah, not the owner of the carbon, it does not follow the Tana in the following brisa, the Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi. As we learned in the brisa, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi says, Shamati, I heard, shahabailim mefaglin, that the owner of the carbon can create pigul, meaning their intention, if they have an intention of outside of the proper time, that also creates pigul. And Rashi explains, Shamati shahabailim mefaglin ba'avodas hakohen. It means to say that the owner has that intention of pigul while the kohen is doing the avodah. Im kibel hakohen b'shtika. Let's say, for example, the kohen receives the blood in silence. He has no machshava. V'chishvu habailim aleh al pigul have a pigul. But the owner at that time, they have an intention of pigul with regards to the avodah that the kohen is doing. So then it is going to be pigul, and that is not like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says the owner's intention doesn't matter. It cannot create pigul. And here in the Brisa is saying that in fact the owner's intention can create pigul, just like the one who's doing the avodah can create pigul, the kohen who's doing the avodah, so too the owner. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, my time at Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, what is the reason of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi? The Amar Kroatz, because the pasuk says, V'hikriv hamakriv, the pasuk says, V'hikriv hamakriv, the full pasuk says, V'hikriv hamakriv karbono la'Hashem, min chasolas isarn bolol b'revias ahin shaman. So by saying V'hikriv hamakriv, hamakriv, as Rashi explains, v'hikriv hamakriv karbono beparshas nesachim ksiv. It says again, it's the v'hikriv hamakriv karbono. He's going to bring the carbon. V'hikriv hamakriv karbono la'Hashem alma makriv karbono karilei. You see that the owner is also called the makriv. He's also the one bringing the offering. Hilka chavulu bechlal hamakriv lo yechashiv. Therefore, he's also going to be included in the pasuk hamakriv lo yechashiv. That his intention is also going to make a difference when it comes to pigul. It comes from that pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, that's the Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, we just quoted that the owners can create pigul, even though someone else is doing the action, is doing the avoda. So Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Kulhu Sfira Lahu, they all hold the same basic idea, that Zeh Mechashev, V'Zeh Oved, Havim Machshava, that if this one is the one with the intention, and the other one is performing the ritual, or performing whatever needs to be performed, that is considered to be an intention. Even though the person with the intention is not doing the action, still that intention is meaningful. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi Hadiyam, and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi is what we just quoted in the Brisa, that even though the owner is not the one doing the avoda, the owner's intention can create pigul. Where do we see this with Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer D'Tanan, we see this in Rabbi Eliezer, as we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Meseches Chulin, Hashochet La'oved Kochavim, let's say a person slaughters an animal, for the owner of this animal is an Oved Kochavim, is an idol worshiper. Shchitaso ksheira. The Tanna Kama says that slaughtering is kosher. For Rabbi Eliezer posel, but Rabbi Eliezer says it's disqualified. And the idea there is that the Ovid Kochavim has intention for avodah zarah, even though he's not the one doing the shchita. So you see that the intention of the owner, who's not actually performing the action, does make a difference according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rashi explains Rabbi Eliezer posel. Rabbi Eliezer says posel. Hasam mefarish behedya. There it's explained explicitly. Shestam machsheves Ovid Kochavim. In general, the intention of the Ovid Kochavim is la'avodas Kochavim. He's intending for avodah zarah. V'afagav delo iu shachid la. And even though he's not the one that's doing the actual slaughtering, posel, it is going to be posel. It is going to be disqualified. And the Gemara continues. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Where do we see that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar holds this idea? The Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah, the Shinuya Nuschos changes it from the Tnan to the Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa. The Brisa says as follows: Klal Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar has the following rule: Kol she'ein kosher lahatzniya. Let's say it's something that normally is not stored away; it's not considered an important item. Ve'ein matzniyan kamo. Let's say the amount, the shear, that amount of it, a person would generally not consider to be important enough to store it away. So huchsher lazev v'hitzniyo. Let's say for this particular person, it is considered important, and he stores it away. Uva acher v'hotzio. And then someone else does the actual hotzio. He's the one that actually takes it out on Shabbos, transfers it from one rishus to another. We're talking here about the malacha of hotzah on Shabbos. So nischayev zeh b'machshava shel zeh. So this person can be obligated because the other person had intention. In other words, the fact that the owner considered this to be an important item and considered this to be something that should be stored away and kept, therefore that makes it important. And now the other person who's doing the action is going to be considered that he did a hotzah with something of significance, and therefore he's going to be chayiv. Again, you see that the intention of one person affects with regards to the action of the other person. And Rashi explains, she'ein kosher lahatzniya, something that normally is not something that is kept, but Mesechet Shabbos, could go in dam nida, or isser hanan Mesechet Shabbos. Examples are dam nida, or let's say something that's just forbidden. Anything that's forbidden b'hana, you can't derive benefit from it, so therefore it's forbidden b'hana, you can't get benefit. It's not something that's meant to be kept. Ve'ein matzniyan kamo, and again, let's say it's something that you wouldn't, that amount of it is insignificant. Shekasheru latzniu, it's something that in theory you would keep, you would set aside. Im hoya shiurov would be a certain amount of it. Aval shiuro shel zem muatu, but the amount that you have of this particular item is very little. Ve'ein adam choshvo latzniu, the person doesn't consider it important enough to set it aside, to keep it. Uva acher v'hotzio b'Shabbos l'Rosh Hashanah. Now somebody else comes and takes what someone else considered as significant. He takes it out to Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, chayiv. Then in that case, the person is liable. Techashiv melacha mipnei machshavto shel zeh shehuchsher lo v'etzniu, because it's considered to be a malacha because of the intention of the other person, of that person who kept it. And so therefore, again, you see that this person's intention will affect the actions of the other person and make him liable. And the Gemara continues, Tarvayu, both of the Tanoim, Islahu de Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi, they would agree with Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi. In other words, we have three examples over here where one person's machshava affects the other person's actions, and the Gemara is now commenting that the two other Tanoim, they will agree with Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi. Again, Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi is the one that says that the Bailam am Refaglin, that when it comes to a carbon, the owner of the carbon can create pigul, even though he's not the one that's doing the avoda. Everybody would agree to that for the following reason. Because hashta bachutz amrinan, if those other Tanoim, they apply this idea bachutz, meaning outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so bifnim miboy, does it even need to be said in the Beis HaMikdash? It's more obvious in the Beis HaMikdash that we would say that one person's machshava would affect the other. And Rashi explains v'tarvayu, meaning Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would agree with Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, because hashta b'chutz ba'avodas kochavim v'Shabbos, by avodah zara. Again, that's the slaughtering by avodah zara, and then by Shabbos, the carrying. To lo ksiva b'hu machshava behedi. It's not written over there by avodah zara and Shabbos, the idea of machshava explicitly. Amrinon, yet we say zeh mechashev v'zeh osa have machshava. Again, they say that if this one has the intention and this one does the action, it's considered an intention. So bifnim, when it comes to inside, meaning bekarbonos, when it comes to karbonos, the machshava b'hu ksiva, where machshava is actually written over there, mibai, does it even need to be said? And so therefore, again, those two Tanoim certainly will agree with Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi. That's the idea of, again, tarvayu islahu Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi. But the Gemara continues and says Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi, but on the other hand, Rebbe Elazar b'Rebbe Yossi less lahu de tarvayu, he might not agree with the other two Tanoim, because dilma bifnim hu damrinan bachutz lo amrinan. Maybe we say it only in the Beis HaMikdash with karbonos, where you have a pasuk, but we wouldn't say it outside of the context of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi explains again, bifnim hu da'amar mishum de'ikra machshavos bekarbonos ksiva. This whole idea of machshava is really written mainly by karbonos, avol bachutz, but outside, kagon avodas kochavim v'Shabbos lo, like by avodah zara, and by Shabbos we might not say it. And the Gemara continues along these lines. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar islay de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says the idea when it comes to Hotzah on Shabbos, so he would agree with Rabbi Eliezer, who says it again in the context of slaughtering, in the context of the Ovid Kochavim having intention for Avodah Zarah. And why would he certainly agree there? Because Hashta b'Shabbos amrinan. If now we say this by Shabbos, so ba'avodas Kochavim iboy, does it even need to be said by Avodah Zarah? It's more likely by Avodah Zarah. We'll see Rashi on that in a moment. But the reverse also, Rabbi Eliezer less laid Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Eliezer will not necessarily hold of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Dilma ba'avodas kochavim hu da'amrit ke'ein bifnim. Maybe we only say it by avodah zara because that's similar, that follows similar rules to bifnim, things that are done in the Beis HaMikdash, karbonos, avol Shabbos. But when it comes to Shabbos, meleches machsheves asur. The Torah says that it's meleches machsheves that is asur. Again, we will see Rashi. Rashi explains ba'avodas kochavim miboy. Do we even need to say it by avodah zara? By avodah zara, it's more likely than by Shabbos. The avodas kochavim, says Rashi, avodah zara dumya da avodas penim chayiv barachmona. The Torah says that you're chayiv by avodah zara, similar to the avodah that's done in the Beis HaMikdash. Kedamrinan bi'arba misos. We say this in Parak Arba Misos in Sanhedrin. It says zoveach lalohim yacharam bilti laHashem, and we learn from that pasuk avodos harouyos lamakom, the avodos that are fit to be done to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, avodah that's done in the Beis HaMikdash, those kinds of actions chayiv b'hu ba'avodas kochavim. So those, a person would be liable if he does that for an avodah zara. Bein shedarka bekach, whether it's the normal way to serve the avodah zara in that fashion. Bein shein darka bekach, whether that's not the normal way to serve the avodah zara. Hilkach linyan machshava nami. Therefore, since you have that parallel between avodah zara and karbonos, so when it comes to machshava as well, ikal migmra mibifnim, we can learn that out from what happens with regards to karbonos in the Beis HaMikdash. But when it comes to Shabbos, the Gemara said meleches machsheves asra Torah. By Shabbos, the Torah says it's meleches machsheves that's asur. Again, that means it's malacha, it's work, it's action. That's machsheves, has to do with intention. Meaning shenismecha Shabbos leparshas hamishkan bevayakel. Shabbos is near the parsha of the Mishkan in Vayakel. Umeleches machsheves sha'osa osa miskaven lemalacha gemurim. Meleches machsheves means that the person who's doing it has intention for a full malacha. Ela sheshagag b'Shabbos, but he made a mistake, let's say, in terms of whether it was Shabbos. Osavar, maybe he thought shemalacha zum muteres. He thought this malacha malacha was mutter. V'zeh shir zeh choshev be'einav eino miskaven l'malacha. And over here, let's say you have a situation where this particular amount, it wasn't choshev to him, it wasn't considered important to him. Somebody else considered it important, but he, the person doing the malacha, doesn't consider it important, so that would not qualify as a meleches machsheves. That's what the Gemara means to say over here. Therefore, since it wouldn't qualify as a meleches machsheves, there's less reason to say that the intent of the other person is going to be relevant, and that's why by Shabbos it's less likely to say it than by Avodah Zarah. Hadran Aloch Beis Shammai, we will return to you, Perek Beis Shammai, and this is the end of the fourth Perek of Meseches Zevachim. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the fifth Perek of Meseches Zevachim. And the Perek begins with the Mishnah, Ezel Mekomon Shel Zevachim, what is the proper place when it comes to Karbonos? Kodshei Kodshim, when it comes to Kodshei Kodshim, those are Karbonos that are the most holy. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Shchitason B'tzafon, so by those Karbonos, the slaughtering takes place in the north. It means to say the north part of the Azara. Rashi explains, Kodshei Kodshim Kulan Bechlal Chatos, V'ashamos, V'ola, V'shalmei Tzibur. We're talking about all Kodshei Kodshim, meaning carbon Chatoses, Asham, Ola, and also if you have a communal carbon shlamim. Now that's in terms of slaughtering. By all of them, the slaughtering is in the north. But in terms of the application of the blood, in terms of the burning, so there you have some different halachas by the various kinds of kodshei kodshim. So therefore, hadrid tani lu kol chad v'chad bi'apei nafshei lefarish hilchosei. And that's why each one is going to be taught by the Mishnah independently in order to explain their particular halachos. Shchitason b'tzafon, their slaughtering is in the north. Over Gemara mefarish my time alotana v'kibel daman. The Gemara will explain why not also say that the receiving of the blood is in the north, because that also is in the north. U'ma'ishna detanan chatos hapnimios bereisha, and also why is it that the Mishnah is learning chatos hapnimios first? Why we first go immediately into chatos hapnimios, the inner carbon chatoses, as we'll see in the Mishnah in a moment. In any case, again, the Mishnah said shchitason b'tzafon. The slaughtering is in the north, and now the Mishnah begins to discuss the chatos hapnimios. The Mishnah says par v'soyer shel Yom HaKippurim, when it comes to the bull and the he-goat of Yom Kippur, shchitason b'tzafon, so there the slaughtering is in the north, v'kibul damon b'chlishares b'tzafon, also the receiving of the blood in a klishares, in the vessel that's used for service in the Beis HaMikdash, that's also done in the north of the Azara. V'damon ton hazoya, and then in terms of the blood, what do you do with the blood from these animals? It needs to be sprinkled al bein habadim, that means between the poles that were by the Aron in the Kodesh Kodashim. V'al haparoches, also to be sprinkled on the paroches. V'al mizbeach hazahav, and also on the golden mizbeach, which is the inner mizbeach. And matana achas mehen ma'keves, even if one application of blood is missing, that is a requirement that would be problematic if even one is missing. Shiyare hadam, and then the remainder of the blood, hayashofech al yesod ma'aravi shal mizbeach achitzon, that was poured on the base of the western base of the Mizbeach HaChitzon, meaning the outer Mizbeach. If that was not done, if the remainder was not poured to the base of the Mizbeach, lo ikev, that is not something that is ma'akev, it's not something that's absolutely required. And Rashi explains, Par v'sor shel Yom HaKippurim, B'Gemara Yolef Taima, Minolan d'shchitason v'kibul daven b'chlishares b'tzafon. The Gemara will explain the reason. How do we know that they're slaughtering and the receiving of the blood in a klishares is b'tzafon, is in the north. B'chlishares, with a klishares, again, d'chsib ba'ola, b'sinai, v'yasem ba'agonos. It says they placed it in the basins. Umimeno lamdu kol hazvachim b'hekesh liton kli. That's how we learn by all karbonos that a vessel is needed, a klishares is needed to receive the blood. Hazoya al ben habadim, again, when it comes to the par v'sor shel Yom HaKippurim, you do a sprinkling between the poles by the Aron in the Kodesh Kodashim. Omed ben shnei badei Aron, he stands between the two poles of the Aron, u'mazeh echad l'mal, and he sprinkles one up, v'zayin lamata, and seven down, keneged ovia shel kaporis, corresponding to the thickness of the kaporis, v'lo hayu nogim bo, and they didn't touch it. V'ala paroches, also sprinkling on the paroches, that's the curtain that separated the Kodesh from the Kodesh Kodashim, kenechsiv v'chein yasa lo moed, like it says, that's what it means in the pasuk when it says yasa lo moed. V'al mizbeach hazav, also on the golden mizbeach, kenechsiv vayetze el mizbeach b'acharei mos, like it says in Parashas Acharei Mos. And Rashi continues, Matana achas min ma'akeves. Again, when it comes to these karbonos, even one application of the blood is ma'akev, is required, meaning all of them are required. Kedamrinim in Perek Beis Shammai, like we say in Perek Beis Shammai. Shiyori hadam hayashofech al yisod. The remainder of the blood they pour to the base of the mizbeach. Yolef beGemara, that's learned in the Gemara. V'im lo nosan shirayim halal yisod leikav hakapara. If those shirayim, that remainder, wasn't poured to the base of the mizbeach, it does not hold back the kapara. Of Gemara Yolef lavebraisa yachol yakvenu. And in the Gemara, they're going to learn this out in a Braisa. And the Mishnah continues, Porim hanisrafim, with regards to the bulls that are burned, Usi'irim hanisrafim, and the he-goats that are burned. It's talking here about the fact that they're burned outside of Yerushalayim, and the truth is, that is also true by the par and soyer shel Yom HaKippurim, but the Mishnah means to say the other chatos hapnimios, now the other carbon chatoses that are inner carbon chatos. So by those, by the Porim hanisrafim and Sirim hanisrafim, Shchitas and Betzafon, those are also slaughtered in the north. V'kibol daman b'chlisharis Betzafon, their blood is received in a klisharis in the north of the Azara. V'damon ton hazoya al haparoches v'al mizbeach hazav, and their blood, it needs to be sprinkled on the paroches and on the mizbeach hazav. There is no sprinkling in the kodesh hakodashim when it comes to these parim hanisrafim and seirim hanisrafim. And Rashi explains, parim hanisrafim par helim u par kohen mashiach. This refers to the par that's brought by the communal sin, and also the par of the kohen gadol. She'ein necholin lakohanim. Those are not eaten by the kohanim. El nisrafin chutz liYerushalayim. Rather, they're burned outside Yerushalayim. Everything is burned except for that which is burned on the Mizbeach, but the rest of those animals are burned outside of Yerushalayim. K'nechsibu el shefech hadesh and yisarif. That's learned out from the pasuk. El shefech hadesh and yisarif. V'alfinan b'seder yuma shu chutz Yerushalayim. They learn out in Seder Yuma, in Meseches Yuma, that means it's burned outside of Yerushalayim. U'seirim hanisrafim. That's the he-goats that are burned. Seirei avodas kochavim. That refers to the he-goat that is brought for the communal sin of avodah zara. Shehukshu lepar helim l'chol divreim. That's compared to the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor in all regards. V'Perek Beis Shammai and Perek Beis Shammai. Hazoya ala paroches ksibahu. Again, it's written that they do sprinkling on the paroches by these karbonos. Avol bein habadim lo ksibahu, but it doesn't say anything about sprinkling between the poles of the Aron. Kedechsib Par Yom HaKippurim, as that is written by the Par Yom HaKippurim. V'hiza betzba al pnei hakaporos. That's a difference between the Par Yom HaKippurim and these parim hanisrafim and the seirim hanisrafim. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis.